Death Knights are easily one of the most fun classes to play because you embody an evil, unholy warrior of death who can summon the dead, spread pestilence and disease, cast debilitating spells, and also be a plate-wearing juggernaut who can cleave down multiple enemies at melee range. Death Knights are a powerful new type of class, a hero class, starting at level 55 and possessing the ability to deal not only physical damage, but also shadow and frost. Not only that, but they have self-enhancing spells like Horn of Winter, Anti-Magic Shield, and many more that make them a terror to spellcasters and plate-wearing classes alike. Not only is the class fun to play, but they are deathly powerful in both PvE and PvP, with the ability to be a top-tier tank as blood specialization, as well as a top-tier DPS in both Unholy and Frost specializations. You can play any way you'd like as a Death Knight. Not only do Death Knights bring damage to a raid, but they also have powerful raid-wide buffs such as Ebon Plague, which grants 13% increased magic damage taken on targets, and improved Icy Talons, which grants 20% increased melee haste and your own haste by 5%. Top it all off with the ability to equip the new legendary in Wrath of the Lich King called Shadowmourne, and there are plenty of reasons to play a Death Knight in Wrath of the Lich King. Now that you're convinced Death Knights are a great choice for Wrath of the Lich King, let's talk about what is the best race for Death Knights in Wrath of the Lich King. Now this question is frequently asked because any race can be a Death Knight in Wrath of the Lich King, so you can feel as though you may have chains of ice paralyzing you from making a choice. But fret not, I will cast Hand of Freedom on you and tell you which is the best for both Horde and Alliance, starting with Horde. For Horde, from a PvE DPS standpoint, Orc is the best. They have 5 expertise with axes, which Shadowmourne is. Blood Fury no longer gives you a healing debuff, and it also grants attack power and spell damage. Command gives your pets 5% increased damage, which means your Ghoul, your Army of the Dead, as well as your Gargoyle if you're Unholy, which is very powerful. If you're thinking about PvP, for Horde, your best bet is Blood Elf for the AoE Silence or Interrupt. It's a close race, in my opinion, if you want the nerfed version of Will of the Forsaken with Undead, which only removes Fear and Sleep as well as Charm, but does not grant that 5 seconds of immunity. Or, if you want the Troll Berserking, which has been buffed, along with Da Voodoo Shuffle, which reduces movement speed, slows duration by 15%. Overall, though, I think Blood Elf wins for PvP, where an Interrupt at the right time in the right place, and it's also AoE, can win you the duel, the arena, the battleground, etc. Now when it comes to Alliance, for pure PvE DPS, I believe Draenei is the best. The 1% spell and melee hit rating, hit chance for you and your party will be sought after and useful. You'll want 1 Draenei in each group. Human Sword and Mace specialization has been nerfed in Wrath of the Lich King, and Shadowmourne is an axe anyways. No other race has any damage boosting racials. Now for PvP, it's a totally different story. Human, hands down, is the best PvP race in Wrath of the Lich King for any class that can be human. For every man for himself, granting a free PvP trinket is simply the most powerful PvP racial in Wrath of the Lich King. At the end of the day, for both factions, for PvE, the buffs honestly aren't game-breaking, so I'd recommend just go whichever race you think is the coolest. If you're a serious PvPer, you're probably going to make a human Death Knight regardless. Now, changing gears, we're going to talk a little bit about leveling your new, fresh Death Knight. Now, we're going to talk about gear to get while leveling, and Death Knights are unique in that doing your starting series of quests gets you a full set of rares that frankly look amazing. So when you head to Outland to start leveling, your gear is pretty decent and doesn't actually get replaced immediately. Even Hellreaver, the great two-handed polearm from Ramparts, is only slightly an upgrade from your Great Sword or Great Axe of the Ebon Blade that you get from the starting series of quests. If you can find a group while you're leveling, leveling, doing the Ring of Blood will be well worth it. You get lots of experience, as well as you get the Honed Void Axe, which is a nice upgrade in raw damage, and you also get 30 agility. Especially if you're Orc, the 5 expertise can be nice. At level 68, you can head to Northrend, where the new continent awaits. And when it comes to getting good gear, a lot of it honestly will come from dungeons, and then heroics, and then raids. But while you're leveling, a good weapon is something worth going out of your way for. So we're going to talk about Northrend weapon progression, starting with two-handed axes. So when you first land on Outland, the first item you should probably seek out is the Axe of Frozen Death. This is a level 68 quest reward in Borean Tundra called Last Rites if you're Alliance, or Hellscream's Champion if you're Horde. Now, obviously, this definitely sort of shows my bias for starting in Borean Tundra versus on the east side of Northrend and the Howling Fjord, but that's up to you. I think the Axe of Frozen Death is a great starter weapon. The next weapon you could potentially get that's also an axe is Captain Carver's Persuader. This is a level 73 world drop BOE, so good luck finding it, but if you want to go to the auction house and purchase one, chances are you'll probably be able to find it. And then after that, we're going to talk about the Honed Cobalt Cleaver. This is also a level 73 BOE blue. However, this is made from blacksmiths, and it's really not that hard to make. It just requires 4 Saronite bars, 12 Cobalt bars, and 2 crystallized fire, so you could probably find that. And then at level 75, there's the De-Raged War Axe. This is a quest reward from the Amphitheater of Anguish. So just like Ring of Blood, Northrend has the Amphitheater of Anguish, lots of experience, and you get that nice good item at the end. At level 78, there's the Wormclaw Battle Axe from the Cache of Aragos in the Oculus. And then from that point, there's a lot of level 80 options. You could potentially get the Edge of Oblivion, which is level 80 from Jadoga Shadowseeker, a boss in An-Kahet, the Old Kingdom. There's the Colossal Skullclad Cleaver, a level 80 purple from Loken in the Halls of Lightning. And those are all different axes. I did forget to mention Ingvar's Monolithic Cleaver. This is actually a level 70 axe, which drops from Ingvar the Plunderer and Utgard Keep. So there's also that option too. Moving on to two-handed maces, which Death Knights can use in Wrath of the Lich King, we have the Petrified Ironwood Smasher. This is a level 76 BOE blue world drop. Again, probably you're not going to find it, but maybe on the auction house you might. Saronite Mind Crusher. This is actually a BOP blacksmithing weapon, so chances are you're not going to get this unless you already have all of the materials from an alt to level up blacksmithing on your Death Knight very quickly. It requires 20 Saronite bars and 2 crystallized fire, so not very hard to make. There's Durkee's Superstructure. This is actually a level 80 mace that drops off a rare elite in the Storm Peaks, so once you get max level you could go for it. There's also the Crimson Cranium Crusher, which is a level 75 quest reward from the Amphitheater of Anguish if you're going for those two-handed maces. Moving on to two-handed swords, the Troll Butcherer is a level 74 item that drops from Trollgore in Draktheron Keep. There is Dreadlord's Blade, which is a level 78 item in The Culling of Stratholme. There's also the Sword of Justice, which everyone always calls the Tuning Fork, if you remember. That's from the Halls of Stone. It's a level 80 item. And there's also the Rune Blade of Demonstrable Power at level 80. Requires Revered with the Knights of Ebon Blade, but can be bought from Duchess Minx. Moving on to polearms, our last item, we have Banner Slicer, a level 75 world drop BOE, so check the auction house. There's also the Icier Barbed Spear, which is a level 75 quest item from the Amphitheater of Anguish, and the Whale Stick Harpoon, a level 78 item, which requires Revered with the Kaluak, sold by either Kaluak Quartermaster in Dragonblight or the Howling Fjord. There is also the Saliva Corroded Pike, which is a level 80 item from Morag in the Violet Hold, and those are basically a lot of the entry-level / you just hit level 80 items that you can go for in Northrend. Now, next I want to talk about Glyphs for Death Knights. So Glyphs are a new feature in Wrath of the Lich King, which allow you to augment your spells and abilities with 3 major and 3 minor glyphs. These are slowly unlocked as you level, and at level 80 you'll have access to all 6. the best glyphs for you are going to depend on what specialization you are, regardless if you're still leveling or if you're looking for endgame best in slot glyphs. For that reason, we're going to go more in depth on glyphs when we get into each specialization section, which we're actually going to do right now. And Unholy is up first. If you're not interested in Unholy, feel free to skip around. Now, the best glyphs for Unholy, for Major, we have the Glyph of Dark Death. This is going to increase the damage or healing done by Death Coil by 15%. Very nice. There's the Glyph of Disease. This is very important. This causes your Pestilence ability to now refresh disease durations and secondary effects of diseases on your primary target back to their maximum duration. So this is very important because your 2 diseases that you want on every target are both Frost Fever and Blood Plague. These are going to make all of your abilities do more damage, not all of them, but mainly the strikes like Blood Strike and Plague Strike, Death Strike. And in order to get those diseases on, you have to cast Icy Touch for Frost Fever, and you have to cast Plague Strike for Blood Plague. And so being able to use just 1 rune, a Blood rune, to cast Pestilence is much better than having to use 2 runes, a Frost rune and an Unholy rune, in order to refresh your diseases. So the Glyph of Disease is very, very good. Moving on to the Glyph of Icy Touch. Your Frost Fever deals 20% additional damage. This is very strong. Obviously, it just is amazing. You're doing 20% more damage with one of your dots. When it comes to minor glyphs, you're typically going to see things that are just small quality of life improvements, but there is one that actually does make a bit of a difference, and that one is the Glyph of Blood Tap. Your Blood Tap no longer causes damage to you. This is pretty nice because Blood Tap takes some of your health in order to convert a blood rune into a death rune. A death rune can be used as a frost rune, a unholy rune, or a blood rune, any of the 3. And then we have Glyph of Pestilence, which increases the radius of your pestilence by 5 yards. That's actually another good one. And then we have Glyph of Raise Dead, where your Raise Dead spell no longer requires a reagent. This is a just quality of life change. Obviously, it's not game breaking because carrying around reagents with you isn't really that hard to do. It's just inconvenient. And that's where we're going to switch over to Unholy leveling talent progression. So while you're leveling a Death Knight, you're going to unlock your talents pretty rapidly. So I would say the talents don't matter too much because you're still in the Death Knight starting zone. You're going to unlock a lot of your talents. The order doesn't matter very much, but I'm still going to give you my recommendations for Unholy leveling talent progression. So first up, Vicious Strikes is amazing. It's going to give you increased critical strike chance and increase critical strike damage bonus of your Plague Strike and Scourge Strike. Very, very strong. I love this talent. We have Virulence, which increases your chance to hit with spells by 3% and reduces the chance your dots get removed or cured, which is fine. It's going to be good later if you're going for PvP. Now from this point, I really like Morbidity and I really like Ravenous Dead. Increasing your total strength by 1%, as well as increasing the damage done and healing of Death Coil by 5%, are both very strong. I think Ravenous Dead is stronger. Just overall gaining that bonus strength is great. It's going to improve every single one of your abilities, so I like to get Ravenous Dead, and then I like to get Morbidity, so you can get that increased damage of Death Coil. From there, you can just get Outbreak because it's very strong. It increases the damage of your Plague Strike by 30%, so you want to get this one ASAP. From there, actually Epidemic helps a lot because you don't want to be refreshing your dots too frequently, and this is going to increase the duration of Blood Plague and Frost Fever by 6 seconds, so you can use your runes on more powerful things. Now from this point, I really like Blood Caked Blade. This is very strong. It gives your auto attacks a 30% chance to cause a blood-caked strike, which hits for 25% weapon damage, plus 12.5% for each of your diseases on your target. So this is going to get more value the longer the fight is, but obviously you're going to be doing lots of fighting because you're leveling, so it's very, very strong. From there, you could get Night of the Dead if you're using your Ghoul on cooldown if you've learned the spell. I personally think Necrosis is more consistent, so I like to put 5 points into this. Now you might be wondering, why am I not getting on a pale horse? Now honestly, this is a favorite of mine. I'm sure you love this talent too, but to be honest, just increasing your mount speed by 20% I feel like is not game-breakingly good. You already have an epic mount. I think a lot of people could make an argument for getting on a pale horse. I just don't think it's necessary, but that's just me personally. From here, you could definitely get Impurity. I think Impurity is very, very strong. And of course, you do want to get Knight of the Dead, and then you can unlock Master of Ghouls, because once you have your Ghoul out permanently, that's going to be a very nice DPS bonus. From there, I would go ahead and get Desolation. Causes you to deal 1% additional damage with all attacks for the next 20 seconds when you use Blood Strike. Now, there are a lot of talents here that are good that I'm skipping over. Unholy Blight is pretty decent, but it's kind of a PvP talent, preventing your diseases from being dispelled. If you are on a PvP server, you might be getting different talents than this. Desecration is another very, very powerful talent, which basically gives you an AoE slow, extremely powerful. But again, this is more of a PvP talent, and we're going strictly for leveling, assuming, you know, honestly, that you can avoid PvP encounters like in a PvE server. Bone Shield is pretty strong. It will fall off a lot because your Ghoul does not necessarily have a taunt. Things are going to be on you all the time, but getting that 20% less reduced damage from all sources is very strong, and you're also going to do 2% more damage with all attacks. So it's pretty good. Crypt Fever is actually very nice. You're going to want to get this. Your diseases also cause Crypt Fever, which increases disease damage taken by the target by 30%, so that is super strong. You're going to want to get Scourge Strike. This is basically going to be one of the abilities you use all the time. 70% of weapon damage is physical damage, plus 238, and then you're also going to do an additional 12% of the physical damage done as shadow damage for each of your diseases on your target. So you can see having those diseases is extremely important. Scourge Strike does some serious damage. Now also Ebon Plaguebringer is huge. This one is going to give you that increased magic damage taken on your target by 13%. It's also going to improve your critical strike chance by weapons and spells by 3% at all times. So another really, really strong talent. Now Wandering Plague is honestly one of the best talents in the Unholy tree when it comes to doing AoE damage. This is a reason why Unholy is the king of AoE damage. No other Death Knight spec comes close. When your diseases damage an enemy, which happens a lot, there is a chance equal to your melee critical strike chance that they will cause 100% additional damage to the target and all enemies within 8 yards. Ignores any target under the effect of a spell that is cancelled by taking damage, so it won't break CC. Wandering Plague is extremely powerful, makes Unholy very, very good at AoE damage. Granted, depending on how you're leveling, maybe if you're doing a lot of single target stuff, then don't get Wandering Plague, but if you're doing dungeons, chances are your group's going to be pulling multiple mobs. This is going to do a lot of damage for you. Rage of Rivendare. Your spells and abilities deal 2% more damage to your targets infected with Blood Plague. Also increases expertise by 1. Love this one. It's very, very strong. 10% more damage. And then Summon Gargoyle. This is extremely powerful. It's a good cooldown to pop when you're in a boss fight, or if you're up against like an elite mob while you're questing, things like that. Now when it comes to the next talents, I like to move over to Frost. Improved Icy Touch is incredibly powerful. Your Icy Touch does an additional 15% damage, and your Frost Fever reduces melee and ranged attack speed by an additional 6%. This is damage mitigation, which also helps your sustain. Not that Death Knights struggle with sustain by any means. And then we're going to get Runic Power Mastery, which increases your maximum runic power by 30. That's nice, so that you don't have to stress out about getting too much runic power. And then what's nice is Black Ice. This is an extremely powerful talent you can just dump points into. Increases your frost and shadow damage by 10%. Just straightforward, very powerful. And then we have Icy Talons. 5 points in that. You leech heat from victims of your Frost Fever, so that when their melee attack speed is reduced, yours increases by 20% for the next 20 seconds. Very, very strong ability. Absolutely love it. And then finally, for our last 2 points, we can put into Endless Winter. Your strength is increased by 4%, and your Mind Freeze no longer cost runic power. That's a very nice quality of life change for interrupting spells. And you also get that 4% strength. And so this is the build that I recommend for PvE DPS as an Unholy Death Knight. You can follow this while you're leveling. You can change points if you're on a PvP server. Like I said, you might want something different. But this is very strong, and this is what many people would call the cookie cutter Unholy Death Knight PvE build. Alright, now that we have the glyphs and talents out of the way, let's talk the Unholy Damage Dance, also known as the Unholy Rotation. So you want to start every fight by using Icy Touch. This is a ranged ability, so it's very easy to use first while you're walking to the enemy, and then by the time you arrive, your GCD should be back, your global cooldown, and you can use Plague Strike, and now both of your Frost Fever and Blood Plague diseases are now on the target, and you can start using Blood Strike. You'll use Blood Strike twice, and then use Scourge Strike. At this point, you can pop your cooldowns and cast Summon Gargoyle. Now, the Gargoyle will get your stats at the time of casting, so that's why you pop the cooldowns right before you summon your Gargoyle. There's a lot of great cooldowns that go well with Summon Gargoyle. From there, you'd use Scourge Strike again. You could cast your Empower Rune Weapon, which refreshes all of your runes. You can then use Scourge Strike again 2 more times, go and use Blood Strike 2 times, and then use Blood Tap in order to convert a Blood Rune into a Death Rune, and then use Pestilence, and then Death Coil 3 times to be, that's a runic power dump, and then cast Horn of Winter, which actually generates 10 runic power. And it's not just a buff, it does generate 10 runic power. And then after that opener, which is like, you know, getting all those cooldowns out of the way, it's a matter of just using 2 Scourge Strikes in a row, followed by 2 Death Strikes, followed by using up all your runic power on Death Coils, and then use Pestilence to refresh your diseases. Now, it's very important to always leave a Blood Rune or Blood Tap on you, ready to use use on Pestilence to refresh your diseases. The reason is because you don't want to have to waste a Frost and an Unholy Rune to refresh Blood Plague and Frost Fever when it can be done with 1 Blood Rune. Remember, never use your last Blood Rune on Blood Strike if your diseases are about to expire. That's worth saying again. Never use your last Blood Rune on Blood Strike if your diseases are about to expire. It's so important that your diseases never expire, because if they're gone and you use like a Scourge Strike on a target without diseases, it's an absolute waste. Okay, let's talk about Unholy Gems next. Exactly which gem sockets go where depends on what gear you have, but generally Death Knights want Strength, Crit, Haste, and of course, most important of all, you need to be hit capped, which is 8%. So for your meta, you're going to want Chaotic Skyfire Diamond. This will grant you 21% critical strike rating and 3% increased critical strike damage. For your red socket, you'll want the Bold Cardinal Ruby. This will grant you a flat 20 strength. For your orange sockets, you could use something like Inscribed Amatrin or Fierce Amatrin, so that's going to be 10 strength, 10 crit strike rating, or 10 strength, 10 haste rating. For your blue gems, which you will need for your meta to be activated, I like to use the Sovereign Dreadstone. This is going to give you 10 strength and 15 stamina. And then basically, if you can afford it, get the Nightmare tier. This matches any socket, and it's a +10 to all stats. So yeah, I like to use that one. When it comes to Unholy Enchants, you can put Rune of the Fallen Crusader on your weapon. That's just straightforward and easily the best enchant. It's Death Knight only. When it comes to your head socket, use the Arcanum of Torment. This is 50 attack power, 20 crit. You have to be revered with the Knights of the Ebon Blade. For your shoulder, get a Greater Inscription of the Axe. This is 40 attack power and 15 crit. You have to be exalted with the Sons of Hodir. For your cloak, get the Enchant Cloak Greater Speed, which gives you 23 haste. Or if you're a tailor, the better option would be Sword Guard Embroidery. If you, for your chest, you want Enchant Chest Powerful Stats. That's just 10 to all stats. For your bracers, 50 attack power. That's called Greater Assault. For your gloves, 44 attack power. That's called Crusher. Or if you are an engineer, go with the hyper speed accelerators. That's very, very nice. For your belt, go ahead and get that extra gem socket from an internal belt buckle. Blacksmiths can make this. And also a frag belt if you're an engineer to throw cobalt bombs from it. It's actually really strong. For your legs, get the 75 attack power and 22 crit from the ice scale leg armor. For your boots, 32 attack power from the greater assault enchant. Or if you're an engineer, get the nitro boosts. It might be super helpful depending on the situation. Now, we mentioned a lot of, or if you have XYZ profession, go this. So I think it is the perfect time to talk a little bit more in depth about professions, the profession specific bonuses, and which ones you should go as an Unholy Death Knight. So talking about unholy professions, we're going to talk about profession-only bonuses in this section. So when it comes to straight-up stats, which professions grant the most, it would be a combination of jewel crafting and blacksmithing. Now, jewel crafting, you can equip 3 jewel crafting-only gems, which if you're just doing strength, it'll be a 39 strength bonus over similarly socketed gems. So basically the jewel crafting only gems give more stats than the non-jewel crafting only stats. It'll be very, very strong if you go jewel crafting, of course. Blacksmithing will provide 2 extra gem sockets in the glove and bracer for a total passive of 40 additional strength, for example, with those 2 extra gem sockets. Another good combination that many people like is the jewel crafting plus engineering. Engineering is ridiculously awesome in PvE because of nitro boots. On top of that, haste from the gloves enchant works really, really well with gargoyle. Haste is very strong with gargoyle. Tailoring again has that nice cloak enchant. You can always change it. You know, if you want to go jewel crafting or blacksmithing, you know, depending what profession you are, you can drop tailoring. Leatherworking has 76 attack power from fur lining attack power. Inscription has 64 attack power from Master's Inscription of the Axe, which is better than the Sons of Hodir one. Enchanting has the ring enchants. You can get 80 attack power total combined from both attack power enchants on both rings. So I would say overall a lot of these professions are pretty equal. Blizzard did a very nice job balancing them in my opinion, but I would say that jewel crafting plus blacksmithing have the highest raw stats if you're literally made out of money, because I'm telling you that's going to take a lot of gold to level those 2 up without mining. But yeah, I would say those 2 are probably best in slot, but I would say jewel crafting engineering a close second, in my opinion. Okay, moving on, let's talk about unholy consumables. What consumables would you want to bring to a raid? You would want the Flask of Endless Rage, which increases attack power by 180. This is a Battle and Guardian elixir, of course, persisting through death. The Potion of Speed, which increases haste rating by 500 for 15 seconds. You might want to drink this right before you summon a gargoyle. You've got the Dragon Fin Fillet for your food. This will give you 40 strength, 40 stamina for 1 hour once you eat it. And then we cannot forget our pet food. That's right, Unholy Death Knights ghouls are very, very important damage dealers, and we need to give them a buff, and the food of choice is the spiced mammoth treats, increasing strength and stamina of your pet by 30 for 1 hour. Now, when it comes to best in slot for Unholy, I was doing a lot of thinking about doing a BIS list for each of the specs, but you know, depending on how Blizzard decides to release Wrath of the Lich King Classic phases and the itemization that goes along with that, this could change dramatically. So I was thinking I'll either add it in the description when we're closer to the Wrath of the Lich King release date, or I'll do it in a separate video, but we're not going to do it for now. Now let's talk about the Blood Death Knight next. Alright, we're going to talk Blood Death Knight, starting with leveling talent progression. What talents should you get? You're a fresh DK, you're in the starting zone. Let's talk about it. Well, I actually think Butchery is pretty nice. After you kill an enemy that grants experience or honor, you generate 20 runic power. In addition, you generate 2 runic power per 5 seconds while in combat. Also very good as Subversion, probably better than Butchery, but this is going to increase your critical strike chance with Blood Strike, Scourge Strike, Heart Strike, and Obliterate by 9%, else reduces your threat. But that 9% crit, very nice. Can't go wrong with that. I love two-handed weapon specialization. Just gives you a 4% damage, all damage increase, so that is super good. Get 1 point into Scent of Blood, giving you a 15% chance after dodging, parrying, or taking direct damage to gain Scent of Blood, causing your next melee hit to generate 10 runic power. So this is going to really help with your runic power generation. Kind of reminds me of like improved aspect of the Hawk for hunters. It's like you don't want to put more than 1 point into it because obviously it's just not worth it. From there, Bladed Armor, just put 2 points into it to unlock the next row. It's going to basically convert some of your armor into attack power. What you really want, in my opinion, is Dark Conviction. Get your Dark Conviction, man. Have conviction about darkness. It's going to give you 5% crit. It's very, very good, so highly recommend that one. And then Death Rune Mastery. This is basically like Reaping for Unholy. It's going to give you a chance to... when you use Death Strike or Obliterate, a 100% chance that the Frost and Unholy runes become Death Runes, which count as Blood, Frost, or Unholy. So that's very nice. Gives you that flexibility in your rotation. Now, from here, we're going to get more Bladed Armor so that we can unlock Bloody Strikes. Now, Bloody Strikes is amazing. This increases the damage of Blood Strike by 15% and Heart Strike by 45%. And increases the damage of Blood Boil by 30%. I mean, this is a bloody crazy talent. This is super good. Try to get this talent as soon as you can. You're also going to want Veteran of the Third War, increasing strength, stamina, and expertise. Very nice talent. Bloody Vengeance. This is going to give you a 3% bonus to physical damage after you deal a critical strike. If you played a Ret Paladin, then this talent sounds very familiar. It's basically the Death Knight version. Also, Abomination's Might. It's going to give you 2% total strength. Also, attack power to party and raid members. People like this buff. Hysteria. Very good. Induces a friendly unit into a killing frenzy for 30 seconds. You're going to get physical damage improved by 20%, but you're also going to lose 1% of your max health every second. 3-minute cooldown, so it's actually quite nice. Bloodworms. This is pretty cool. You're going to have your weapon hits have a 9% chance to cause the target to spawn 2 to 4 bloodworms. Bloodworms attack your enemies, healing you as they do damage. For 20 seconds or until killed. Now, some of you might be wondering, why didn't we get Vendetta, which heals you for, what, 6% of your max health with 3 points in it after you kill a target that yields experience or honor? Yes, that is good, but you know what? It doesn't make you do any more damage, and honestly, I think it slows your leveling down to just get this purely talent, but when there's plenty of sustain that also gives you damage at the same time, like Bloodworms. Now, another awesome ability at this point to get is Sudden Doom. Your Blood Strikes and Heart Strikes have a 15% chance to launch a free death coil at your target. That's amazing. Those procs are super happy fun time, doing extra damage. Also, improved Death Strike. This increases the damage of your Death Strike by 30% and increases its critical strike chance by 6%. And increases the healing granted by 50%. See, there's plenty of healing available in the blood tree. Like, you don't have to get Vendetta. So this is very, very strong. Another very, very strong talent you should totally go out of your way to get. And get Heart Strike as soon as you have those 40 points in blood, because Heart Strike is amazing. You're going to use this as part of your rotation all the time. It does 50% weapon damage to one target, 25% weapon damage to another. It's just very strong in general. And then Might of Mograine is incredibly strong too. It increases critical strike damage bonus of many of your abilities by 45%. So you definitely want to get the Might of Mograine as soon as you get a chance. And then from there, you need to top off Bladed Armor to 5 points in order to unlock Blood Gorged, which will give you 10% more damage, and your attacks ignore up to 10% of your opponent's armor at all times, assuming you are above 75% health. It's pretty nice, which you probably should be considering all of these abilities. Dancing Rune Weapon, gonna be nice, cooldown to pop for maybe boss fights or whatever. You pulled a lot of mobs. It summons a second rune weapon that fights on its own for 12 seconds, doing the same attacks as the Death Knight, but for 50% reduced damage, with only a 1-minute cooldown. So a nice, helpful talent to help you do more damage. Now, from here, I like to go over to the Unholy tree in order to finish out my leveling build. Vicious Strikes, giving you increased 6% crit chance and crit strike damage bonus for Plague Strike and Scourge Strike. 3 points in Virulence, giving you that 3% additional hit. From there, getting that total strength increased by 3%, also making your ghoul stronger in both strength and stamina. Epidemic is very important, so that you don't have to constantly be reapplying Blood Plague and Frost Fever. Morbidity is very powerful. It's going to increase the damage and healing of Death Coil by 10%. Of course, you're going to be getting free Death Coils from Sudden Doom, so Morbidity is a nice talent there. And then what's really strong is Necrosis. Auto attacks deal an additional 20% shadow damage. I mean, it's just straight extra damage you can talent into guaranteed, assuming your auto attack hits. Auto attacking does lots of damage for Death Knights. And then Blood Caked Blade, very, very strong. Auto attacks have a 30% chance to cause a Blood Caked Strike, which hits for 25% weapon damage plus 12.5% for each of your diseases on the target. And this is the build that I would go if you are leveling as a Blood Death Knight in Wrath of the Lich King. And what's super great about this is that this is also your max level 80 Blood Death Knight specialization if you want to be a DPS. Alright, next we're going to talk about Blood Death Knight tanking, which is quite popular in Wrath of the Lich King for the Blood spec. More popular than DPS, I would say, and it is the best tanking specialization that Death Knights can actually go. So, for a Blood Death Knight, switching over to tanking, we're just going to go through this pretty quickly. So, at max level, you're not going to want Butchery anymore. You're going to want Blade Barrier. This is going to give you a 5% decrease on damage taken whenever your blood runes are on cooldown, which is pretty nice. Scent of Blood is pretty good as well, giving you a 15% chance after dodging to make your next 2 melee hits generate 10 runic power. That's nice. Two-handed weapon specialization, doing more damage means more threat, and that is always good. Dark Conviction, giving you that increased chance to critically hit with weapons, spells, and abilities by 5%, which is quite good. The Death Rune Mastery will allow your Deathstrike or Obliterate to convert the Frost and Unholy runes used into Death Runes, which count as Blood, Frost, or Unholy. 5 points into Bladed Armor. That's going to give you a bunch of attack power because you're going to have tons of armor as a plate-wearing class. Veteran of the Third War, very, very powerful. It's going to give you nice stamina, expertise, and strength. Bloody Strikes is incredible. Again, this is one of the powerhouse talents that is just so good, increasing damage of Blood Strike and Heart Strike and Blood Boil, believe it or not. Very, very strong talent. Abomination's Might is very good, as well as Bloody Vengeance, giving you more physical damage bonus. This is a nice raid-wide buff, increasing attack power by 10%, so that's very nice, also getting that increased strength. Hysteria is a very powerful buff. Improved Death Strike is incredibly powerful, along with Vampiric Blood is a wonderful Blood Death Knight cooldown to use in situations where you're being bursted or you're low health. Will of the Necropolis is huge, which is going to help you survive when you're low health. It's going to reduce damage taken by 15% when you're below 35% health. Blood Strike, very, very helpful for keeping aggro. Might of Mograine is very powerful, increasing critical strike damage bonuses of a lot of your abilities. And then Blood Gorged is also very, very good. Now, other than these talents, you might be wondering, what else should we get? Well, I personally highly recommend getting Toughness, increasing your armor value from items by 10%, and reducing duration of all movement slowing effects by 30%. Toughness is very good. It's definitely going to, be helping with bladed armor, increasing your armor value. And then also getting improved Icy Touch is very powerful. That's going to help with aggro generation. Icy Touch is an ability that actually generates the highest amount of aggro, so having it do even more damage is actually very important for that reason. 5 points into Anticipation for getting that increased avoidance. 5% dodge chance is very helpful, because if you dodge an attack, that is great mitigation. And then I also like to put 2 points into Epidemic. This is going to allow you to do your rotation without any snags. It's going to be very, very nice to basically have that increased duration on your diseases, because if you look at the glyphs over here, we're not getting the glyph of disease. Now the glyph of disease, if you remember from the Unholy Death Knight video, it allows your pestilence to refresh the duration of blood fever and frost, or blood plague and frost fever on the primary target. Very, very powerful. We don't get that. There's better runes here. Glyph of Rune Strike, Glyph of Vampiric Blood. I mean, this is pretty powerful. 10% increased critical strike chance, improved vampiric blood is very strong, because this is a very strong ability. You want to improve it. And then Death Strike, Glyph of Death Strike, increases Death Strike damage by 1% for every 1 runic power you currently have, up to a maximum of 25%, and the runic power is not consumed by this effect. So very strong major glyphs, but again, we're not going to have Glyph of Disease, so Epidemic is even more valuable for that reason. Now, we do have 4 points left, and this is where there's sort of room for your own personalization of your tanking build. Now, personally, what I like to do, is I actually really like Spell Deflection. You have a chance equal to your parry chance of taking 45% less damage from a direct damage spell. Now, I think that's just super strong. You know, this is just always on as a passive, so it can be very, very helpful in situations where you know, you're up against a lot of spells being casted. So personally, I absolutely really like this ability. The last ability, frankly, could go, you know, one of many places. Like if you're not hit capped, maybe you want to put it in Virulence. Maybe you want to put 1 point into Black Ice just to do more frost and shadow damage. Can't go wrong with that. It's very powerful. But generally speaking, this is sort of the build that I would go. I think this is a very powerful build, and will suit you very well for PvE Blood Death Knight tanking. All right, now that we went through talents, let's move on and talk about blood abilities and rotation. So when it comes to a single target, the rotation is Icy Touch, Plague Strike, and then Heart Strike, Heart Strike, Heart Strike. Now Heart Strike is a great damage ability, hits up to 2 targets, which is very nice as well, does a percentage of weapon damage, so it's very, very nice. And essentially that is on repeat. You would just do that over and over. When Frost Fever and Blood Plague go down, then reapply Icy Touch and Plague Strike, and then go back to Heart Strike. Pretty straightforward. If you are trying to hold threat on more than 2 targets where Heart Strike is no longer going to be enough, then you're going to need to start using Blood Boil, which is a nice AoE ability and helpful for generating threat on multiple targets. Once again, Icy Touch does a great job generating aggro, and it's also ranged, so it's a great ability. Death Strike is very, very helpful as well as a self-heal, and actually does quite good damage, so mixing in Death Strikes make blood do quite nice self-heals. In the scenario of multiple targets or AoE, Death and Decay is a great ability for holding threat. Now on the Warmane private server, it's bugged, so many people don't think that Blood Death Knights have great AoE threat generation. Simply not the case. Death and Decay and Blood Boil are pretty good. Blood tanks are very strong. I think they cover most bases, but anyways, that's aside the point. Death and Decay is part of the rotation for multiple targets. You're going to use Death and Decay, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Pestilence, so you can spread those diseases everywhere, and then you will use Blood Boil, doing tons of AoE damage. You'll then use Death Strike as needed to keep yourself alive with self-heals and more Blood Boils. That's essentially the way to do it. Now, when it comes to blood glyphs, we did talk about this in the tanking talent section, but you're going to want Glyph of Rune Strike to get that 10% increased critical strike chance, which is very strong. Glyph of Vampiric Blood to increase its duration because it's an excellent defensive cooldown. And then Glyph of Blood Strike is extremely powerful, and you will be using Death Strike for self-heals. That does help a lot. Some of the minor glyphs, Horn of Winter increases its duration. Glyph of Raised Dead will make it so you no longer need Corpse Dust in order to raise your ghoul. And then Glyph of Pestilence will increase the radius by 5 yards, which is very nice for spreading those diseases all over the place. Up next, let's talk about some gems for the Blood Death Knight. Now, of course, your gemming situation will change based on your build, your current equipment, if you've reached certain caps, for example. So, depending on what stage you're at, it might change, but generally speaking, some of your caps are, you're going to want 8% hit, you're going to want 26 expertise, and if you are a tank, you're going to want 540 defense to be defense capped. When it comes to your meta gem for tanking, you'll want the Austere Earthsiege Diamond. Red gems, generally speaking, you'll want to use Regal Dreadstone. You could also use a Nightmare tier in this slot. For blue gems, you'll want the Solid Majestic Zircon, and for yellow, you could also go with the Solid Majestic Zircon. For blood enchants, you're going to want on your head the Arcanum of the Stalwart Protector, your shoulder the Greater Inscription of the Gladiator, on your back or your cloak you'll want Titan Weave or Mighty Armor, for chest you'll want Super Health, for bracers Major Stamina, gloves you'll want Armsman, on the waist you'll want to use the Eternal Belt Buckle for an extra socket, for your legs put on the Frost Hide Leg Armor, for your boots put on Tuskar's Vitality. And last, for your weapon, of course, we're going to go with a Rune Blade enchant. The Rune of the Stone Skin Gargoyle is best for tanking. Now, when it comes to blood professions, I think that jewel crafting is incredible. You will get those 3 jewel crafting only gems, which are roughly 20% better than non-jewel crafting only gems, so something like 60 additional stamina if you go jewel crafting, which is quite nice. Leatherworking, you can get the fur lining if you, this is profession specific, right? You can either get some extra 70 extra resistance of your choice, or you can get about 62 stamina from the fur lining. Engineering has some nice bonuses as well. The nitro boots, you can also get the engineering belt, which you can actually find quite useful, I bet, throwing the cobalt bomb for that AoE damage. Blacksmithing, allowing 2 extra sockets, so that could be an additional 60 stamina potentially, or depending on what gems you use. So blacksmithing, jewel crafting, very, very good combination. When it comes to mining, it could also be a decent profession for a tank because it does grant you 60 stamina, something like that. It grants you extra health. I think it's less than 60 stamina in Wrath of the Lich King. So it's not the best, but it's decent. And you can also use it to gather materials for jewel crafting and blacksmithing before you drop it and later swap to a different profession. When it comes to blood consumables, for tanking, you're going to want the Flask of Stone Blood. For food, you want the Rhinolicious Worm Steak, or the Snapper Extreme, or even the Blackened Dragon Fin. Depends on the fight, of course, and all these different situations. When it comes to potions, you'll might likely be popping lots of indestructible potions, but you'll also want some runic healing potions on you just in case. And with all of that said, let's move on to the third and final talent specialization for Death Knights, Frost. All right, moving on to Frost, we're going to be talking about the Frost Death Knight talent progression. Right when you're starting a new Death Knight, you're in the Death Knight starting zone, getting lots of talents real fast. It's a lot of fun. You're going to want that improved Icy Touch first. 15% additional damage. Very, very nice. It's also going to give you some damage mitigation in the form of a reduced melee and ranged attack speed by 6%. Incredible. And then you're going to get 2 points into Runic Power Mastery, increasing your maximum Runic Power by 30, which is very nice. Now, from this point, you're going to have a two-hander, right? So you don't really want Nerves of Steel, but you're going to want it later. Depending on when you get your 2 one-handers is when you decide to start putting points into this. Granted, you can play Frost without having 2 one-handers, so perhaps you don't want this talent at all, which is why I would then put points into Black Ice, because it's incredibly powerful, increasing Frost and Shadow damage by 8%, up to 10% with 5 points, so that's a great talent indeed. I'd also get Icy Talons immediately next. This is going to reduce their melee attack speed, and it's also going to increase yours by 20%. So when their attack speed is reduced, yours will be increased by 20%. That's really strong. This is also incredibly strong. Annihilation, increasing the critical strike chance of your melee special abilities by 3%, so 3% crit. In addition, there's a 100% chance that your Obliterate will do its damage without consuming diseases. Now that's incredibly important. If you didn't know, Obliterate, it's very powerful, but it does take diseases off, so this talent is super necessary for Frost to be able to use Obliterate repeatedly in a rotation without excuse me, without having to refresh Frost Fever and Blood Plague, the 2 diseases that make it do so much more damage. Now from there, Killing Machine's extremely powerful. Melee attacks have a chance to make your next Icy Touch, Howling Blast, or Frost Strike a critical strike, so that's super strong. You're definitely going to want that one. Chill of the Grave is very good, generating more runic power when using Chains of Ice, Howling Blast, Icy Touch, and Obliterate. I also really like Endless Winter, just getting 4% increased strength. You can't go wrong with that. Glacier Rot, very powerful. Diseased enemies take 20% more damage from Icy Touch, Howling Blast, and Frost Strike. So this is incredibly powerful. You should definitely get this ASAP. Improved Icy Talons is very nice, increasing the melee haste of all party and raid members within 100 yards by 20%, and your haste by an additional 5%. This is a very, very good buff to provide to everyone. People will love you for it. Merciless Combat, your Icy Touch, Howling Blast, Obliterate, and Frost Strike do an additional 12% damage when striking targets with less than 35% health. So you're doing a ton more damage when targets are low health. This is sort of like Execute Phase. Frost Death Knights do more against bosses, makes them powerful in that situation, but obviously this is going to help with everything, because everything is going to be below 35% health before you kill it. Rhyme is also a very good talent, increasing the critical strike chance of your Icy Touch and Obliterate by 15%, and casting Obliterate has a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on Howling Blast and cause your next Howling Blast to consume no runes. Rhyme, very powerful. You're going to want to keep an eye on those procs so that you can use Howling Blast ASAP after you get that proc. Now, from this point, you're definitely going to want Unbreakable Armor. This is an incredibly powerful cooldown you can pop with a 1-minute cooldown, which reinforces your armor with a thick coat of ice, increasing your armor by 25% and increasing your strength by 20% for 20 seconds. 20% increased strength, that's huge. It's a massive cooldown that you're going to want to pop, pretty much before you're popping all of your cooldowns to burst something down. Blood of the North is another really great talent. Increases Blood Strike and Frost Strike damage by 10%. In addition, whenever you hit with Blood Strike or Pestilence, there is a 100% chance that the Blood Rune will become a Death Rune when it activates. Death runes count as Blood, Frost, or Unholy. Now, Blood of the North is exactly the same as Reaping, as well as Death Rune Mastery. It's right here in the Frost Tree. It's always very helpful. Another talent you want to get right away is Frost Strike. This is a strike that costs runic power, 40 runic power. Instantly strike the enemy, causing 55% weapon damage plus 48 as frost damage. So this is why Frost is very powerful. A lot of their damage comes from Frost, so it's super powerful. Definitely want to get Frost Strike as soon as you possibly can. Now, Guile of Gorefiend is another really, really strong talent. It's going to increase the critical strike damage bonus of your Blood Strike, Frost Strike, Howling Blast, and Obliterate abilities by 45%, which is super strong. You also get an increased 6-second duration on Icebound Fortitude, which is a defensive cooldown that all Death Knights get. So Guile of Gorefiend is very, very good. Now, Threat of Thessarian is a talent that you would get if you are dual wielding. So if you are dual wielding, this is going to give you a 100% chance to also deal damage with your offhand weapon. So when you strike with Death Strike, Obliterate, Plague, Rune, Blood Strike, any of your strikes, They'll also deal damage with your offhand weapon. So in this current build, we don't have Nerves of Cold Steel, but let's say you do get 2 one-handers, you're going to want this talent. You're going to want both these talents if you have 2 one-handers. So keep that in mind. But we're not doing 2 one-handers right now. So once you're at this phase, there are a couple different options. You could get some damage mitigation from Frigid Dreadplate. If you're on a PvP server, you might want Lichborn. Draws upon Unholy energy to become undead for 10 seconds. While undead, you are immune to Charm, Fear, and Sleep effects. Very, very powerful, as you can imagine. This... Of course, you can be turned undead, or turn undead is a paladin spell. They can fear you. You can also be shackled by a priest. So there's a number of potential bad side effects that can happen if you go Lichborn. But again, this is all PvP scenario. It's not too much of an issue in this particular scenario, but the next talent that I would recommend for you is probably going either Icy Reach, which will give you an increased range of your Icy Touch Chains of Ice and Howling Blast by 10 yards. You'd only have to put 1 point into that. You could also just put 1 point into Lichborn. It's up to you. I'd probably do Lichborn just for that extra utility. And then Tundra Stalker. Put 5 points into that. Your spells and abilities deal 15% more damage to targets infected with Frost Fever. Also increase your expertise by 5, and then go ahead and get Howling Blast. Now from that point, you could move over to Blood, get Subversion. 9% crit is just so worth it. Like, get that talent ASAP. Your Obliterate, getting that extra crit. I mean, all your strikes, but 9% crit is very, very strong. And then Vicious Strikes and Virulence, more critical strike chance, so that's super good. And then you also want Epidemic, as well as Ravenous Dead. And then you can finish off the build with 5 points into Necrosis. Oh my goodness, I have extra points. So at this point, I would totally get Bloodcaked Blade then with the last 2. So this is sort of the build. You're going to be doing tons of damage with it. And again, the build would be a little bit different. So this is with a 2-hander. If you have 2 one-handers, then you're going to take some points out of here. You can take some points out of... Where did I put this extra point? Right here, actually. We're going to put it into this. Nerves of Steel. Nerves of Steel is super important for when you are dual wielding, so you're going to want to do something like that. And then yeah, I would say if you are dual wielding, this is the build you're going to want to go with in this situation. I feel like I've misplaced a point somewhere where it shouldn't be, but I'm not sure where it is. But anyways, if this is the 2 one-handers, I would go this build. If you want to go with a 2-hander, I would go the other build. Oh, here, this is the point. There we go. This is the one-hander build. This is what PvE DPS Frost Death Knights would use in a PvE situation to maximize their damage. When it comes to Glyphs, Glyph of Frost Strike reduces the cost of Frost Strike by 8 runic power. When it comes to another major one, Obliterate. Glyph of Obliterate is so good. I remember back in the day, it was just incredible. Increasing the damage of Obliterate by 25%. Obliterate does so much damage. And then Glyph of Disease, extremely important for DPS. This is going to save you a Frost rune as well as an Unholy rune from having to cast Icy Touch and Plague Strike. Instead, you can just cast Pestilence, and that will refresh your diseases for you. And then, of course, the minor runes don't matter too much, but, you know, Pestilence increases the range, that's notable, but this is just no longer requiring a reagent called Corpse Dust, and increase the duration of Horn of Winter, but you'll be using Horn of Winter much more frequently than 2 minutes, which with this it'll be 3-minute cooldown, or 3-minute duration, but yes, you'll be using it more frequently because it grants 10 runic power. Anyways, this is the setup, and it will serve you very well. Alright, moving on from talents, let's talk about Frost abilities and rotation. So as a DPS, you're going to want to start with Icy Touch to apply Frost Fever, and then you're going to use Plague Strike to put on Blood Plague, and then you'll want to use Obliterate, which will do a ton of damage, and because we have the Annihilation talent, Obliterate will do its damage without consuming diseases, so you can then go use Frost Strike, and then Blood Strike, and then cast Pestilence. because we have the Glyph of Disease, and Pestilence will refresh the duration of diseases on your target. You can then use Horn of Winter for additional runic power, and then cast another Frost Strike, followed by 2 more Obliterates and a Frost Strike, and just repeat that cycle, minus the Icy Touch and the Plague Strike, because you already have Frost Fever and Blood Plague, and all you have to do is use Pestilence in order to get those diseases refreshed. Remember, never use your last Blood Rune. And if your diseases are about to expire, you must save that for Pestilence. You don't want your diseases falling off. Now, for gemming for the Frost Death Knight, you have a couple of options. Of course, it's always going to depend on what stat you need, but generally speaking, you're going to want to go for a Relentless Earth Siege Diamond for your meta gem. For red gems, generally speaking, you're going to want Bold Cardinal Rubies, Fractured Cardinal Rubies, or Etched Amatrin if you're not hit capped. For yellow, Fierce Amatrin. You're also going to want to look for Rigid King's Amber, if you're not hit capped. For blue, you could use the Nightmare Tier to fill that slot. When it comes to enchants, for your head slot, you'll want the Arcanum of Torment. For the shoulder, the Greater Inscription of the Axe. For the cloak, the Greater Speed or Major Agility. For your chest, Powerful Stats. For your bracers, enchant Bracers Greater Assault. For your gloves, enchant Gloves Crusher. For your waist, Eternal Belt Buckle. That'll give you another socket. For your legs, you're going to want the Ice Scale Leg Armor. And then for your boots, you're going to want Tuskar's Vitality or Greater Assault. Now, when it comes to your weapons, Rune of Razor Ice is great for your main hand, and then for your offhand, Rune of the Fallen Crusader. If you're using a two-hander, use Rune of the Fallen Crusader, but I think generally it's accepted that if you're playing Frost, you're going to have 2 one-handers. When it comes to professions, we're going to talk about strictly profession-only bonuses. I would say that Jewel Crafting plus Blacksmithing offers a lot of straight-up stats. Jewel Crafting gets 3x Jewel Crafting-only gems, so you're going to have a bonus over similarly socketed gems, something like a 20% bonus. I think I did the math, and it'll give you 39 bonus strength if you go Jewel Crafting. If you go Blacksmithing, you'll get 2 extra gem sockets, so a total passive 40% strength, for example, from those extra sockets. Just regular Cardinal Rubies, Bold Cardinal Rubies. Jewel Crafting Engineering is a wonderful profession because of the haste enchant on the gloves. Can always be very helpful for Death Knights, getting their runes back faster. Tailoring has a nice cloak enchant. You can always get that one on your cloak, which is very nice. And then leatherworking, you can either get 76 attack power from fur lining, or you could get 70 resistance from fur lining, so some nice options from leatherworking. Inscription has 64 attack power enchantment on the shoulder, called Master's Inscription of the Axe, which is in fact better than the enchantment from the Sons of Hodir getting Exalted enchant, so it's up to you whichever one you want to go with. Enchanting, you can enchant rings. You get about 80 attack power from both combined. Attack power enchants on each ring. A lot of these professions, in my opinion, are very, very equal. Blizzard did a wonderful job balancing them, but I would say that Jewel Crafting and Blacksmithing have the highest raw stats. So if you're made out of money and you can afford both professions, I would go Jewel Crafting plus Blacksmithing. Now, when it comes to consumables for the Frost Death Knight DPS, for the flask, I would get the Flask of Endless Rage. You're going to want Potions of Speed. You're going to want to eat Hearty Rhino, which will help you with your armor penetration cap. You could also get Dragon Fin Fillet, which is plus 40 strength, which is probably the best if you're looking for just strength build. And once again, when it comes to best in slot for a Frost Death Knight, I would say it very much depends on how Blizzard releases Wrath of the Lich King classic phases and itemization. So I could put down some BIS, but it really is going to depend and could potentially change on what Blizzard decides how they're going to do Wrath of the Lich King classic. So I will either put it in the description when it's available and we know, or I will make a separate video detailing what the best in slot items are. Now, when it comes to Death Knight add-ons, I think there are a few things that are very important. Number one, you're going to want something to help you with your rune tracking. It's very important knowing when runes are available, when they're about to be available. The UI in the top left is so small and sort of out of the way that it's not super helpful, so something to help with that You're also going to want some form of runic power bar that's much bigger, so you know when you're close to max. You don't want to sit at max. It's very similar to rage. You want to use it or you are being inefficient. And then you also need to have some form of disease tracker to know when both frost fever and blood plague are on your target. It's very important to always have those up. So I would say weak auras can probably do that for you. Hopefully that add-on is still in existence by the time you're watching this, but it's an excellent add-on to use. Now, when it comes to Death Knight macros, I'll just throw a bunch on the screen here. There's a ton of them that are really cool. There's a lot of PvP ones where you can throw your ghoul at your focus target, and then he'll gnaw, which is a stun. There's a ton where you can build in your rune strike into all of your other abilities. There's another one where you can pop all your cooldowns, your trinkets, pop a potion of speed, and then summon your gargoyle so it does maximum damage. There's a Chains of Ice focus macro, and on and on and on. There are tons. So I'm going to post these probably in like a Google Doc or something in the description, so you can just copy paste and use at your convenience. But that is it for this Death Knight guide. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a lot of information. It took me forever to make. So if you liked it, go ahead and hit this video up with a like. And if you want more like it, don't forget to subscribe. My name is Toyhouze, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.